Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Imagine waking up tomorrow and knowing your rent, your groceries, basically your basic survival is just fully funded for the rest of your life.
Right. Whether you work or not.
Exactly. Whether you work or not. So ask yourself, would you still show up to your job today? And, if you're managing a team, how would you convince your absolute best people to stay?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And that is the reality we are exploring in today's deep dive. We are tackling a highly comprehensive resource for modern professionals. It's an article by Felix Römer from smartkeys.org, and it's titled Universal Basic Income: Potential Impacts on the Future Workforce.
Yeah, and our mission today is to really just cut right through the political noise, right? We want to extract the strategic, forward-thinking insights on how a universal basic income, or UBI, could fundamentally rewrite the rules of hiring, retention, and just the everyday efficiency of a business.
Because it is arguably the most vital structural shift that any business leader could be preparing for right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And since you, the listener, are already navigating the complexities of this modern economy, we are going to spend time debating, basic dictionary definition.
No, we don't need to do that. We are looking directly at UBI as a predictable cash floor. So according to researchers Fabian Wett and Doug McKay, who are heavily cited in Römer's text, the defining characteristic here is the complete removal of friction.
Okay, what does that mean exactly, the removal of friction?
Well, it means we're talking about regular transfers of money given without means testing. No work requirements, no family status checks.
Right.
It is an unconditional platform designed to be built upon, not, a substitute for a career.
Yeah, I look at it as an economic operating system update for the entire labor force.
I like that analogy.
Because for decades, businesses and workers have been running on an OS full of buggy patches. Conditional welfare cliffs, complex tax credits, temporary emergency relief.
Exactly. It's a mess.
So if we actually execute that system update and shift from a patchwork of conditional benefits to a steady, unconditional baseline, how does that actually change the way a modern business operates?
Well, the momentum for that system update is really accelerating right now. And the text points out that we have to look at recent macroeconomic shocks to understand why this is suddenly back on the agenda.
You're talking about the pandemic, right?
Yeah, the pandemic era stimulus checks, they were a massive forced beta test. They exposed the severe gaps in our traditional means-tested support systems.
Oh, for sure.
And it highlighted just how volatile modern employment has become. I mean, people saw how quickly a government could theoretically distribute frictionless cash.
Right. The money just appeared in your account.
Exactly. But they also felt the acute limitation of a one-time payment when you're facing a persistent, long-term economic shift.
Because, honestly, a one-time check does absolutely nothing to cure long-term anxiety, especially when you factor in the rising anxiety over automation and artificial intelligence taking over middle-tier jobs.
Yeah, the AI factor is huge.
It is. You had figures like Andrew Yang taking his freedom dividend proposal. It was $1,000 a month. And suddenly, the inherent fragility of modern jobs was thrust right onto the national stage.
Right. It wasn't just a fringe academic theory anymore. And that is the pivotal shift here. The momentum didn't just fade when the news cycle moved on. It catalyzed local leaders.
Like who?
Well, like former Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs and major private funders, they started testing the real-world mechanics. So we're now seeing significant private capital like Jack Dorsey's $15 million grant to the group mayors for a guaranteed income.
Wow, $15 million.
Yeah, and that's funding civic pilots to actually observe how this unconditional floor alters human behavior on the ground.
Okay, so if unconditional cash is the ultimate system update, we need to see what happens when the code actually goes live.
Right.
Like what broke and what worked when this was tested on actual human behavior.
Let's look at the data.
But wait, before we get to the specific data out of those cities, let's just clarify the mechanics of delivery. Because from a business and a payroll perspective, UBI operates very differently from something like, say, Milton Friedman's negative income tax, right?
Yes, fundamentally differently. The delivery mechanism alters the behavioral outcome completely. A negative income tax, it adjusts your benefits retroactively through the tax system as your earnings change over a whole fiscal year.
Okay.
UBI, on the other hand, is proactive. It's direct, simple cash on the first of the month, regardless of what your W-2 says.
Right, because if there's one thing that cures acute financial anxiety and motivates a workforce, it's filling out a 1040 form and waiting 6 months for the IRS to process a rebate.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nightmare. And that is exactly the friction Rimmer's text highlights. Tax-based routes alter the timing of relief. They force individuals to integrate with these incredibly slow bureaucratic systems.
Yeah.
If a worker has a medical emergency or maybe a sudden drop in hours in October, a tax rebate the following April does not prevent them from getting evicted today.
Or defaulting on a car loan.
Right. UBI removes that friction entirely. It provides immediate predictability for the household. And for an employer, that means the worker is focused on their job, not their survival math.
Okay, let's dig into those beta tests then, because the article details some fascinating global and local pilots that measure this exact behavioral shift. You mentioned Stockton, California.
Yeah, the seed pilot.
Right. They provided $500 a month as regular cash, and the data showed massive improvements in financial stability. But what really stands out to me is the employment metric. It had neutral to positive effects on jobs and work search.
Which surprises a lot of people.
Right. People didn't just take the $500 and head to the beach.
No, they didn't. And to understand why that happens, you have to look at the mechanics of poverty and time scarcity.
Yeah.
When you inject $500 of frictionless cash into a household, you are essentially buying back their cognitive bandwidth.
Cognitive bandwidth. I like that phrase.
It's crucial. In Stockton, that cash allowed people to pay for the childcare or, the reliable transportation required to actually go to a job interview. It removed the logistical barriers to employment.
That makes a lot of sense. And then you have these highly targeted pilots exploring even deeper barriers, like the initiative in Durham.
Oh, the reentry pilot.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. They provided $500 a month to 55 formerly incarcerated individuals. That is a demographic facing immense systemic friction. I mean,
Right.
extreme barriers to finding jobs, securing housing.
And often legal restrictions on accessing existing programs like SME.
Yeah.
The Durham pilot, which was backed by that Jack Dorsey funding, by the way, is a perfect micro-study in community reentry. When someone leaves the justice system, the immediate lack of capital often drives recidivism.
Because they have literally nothing.
Exactly. You need a deposit for an apartment.
Yeah.
You need steel-toed boots for a construction job. By providing a predictable financial floor, the pilot tests how unconditional capital allows individuals to stabilize, re-enter the labor market, and just bypass the traditional punitive welfare systems that reject them.
And we are just seeing this in the U.S. either. I mean, the data from Europe is incredibly revealing. Finland ran a major randomized trial.
Yeah, that was a big one.
They gave €560 a month to unemployed individuals over 2 years. And the recipients naturally reported higher life satisfaction, lower stress.
Obviously.
But crucially, the researchers saw small but clear positive employment signals. And I want to pause here. Why would giving unemployed people free money make them more likely to find work?
It sounds totally backwards, I know. But it comes down to eliminating what economists call the welfare trap, or the benefits cliff.
Okay, break that down for me.
So in a traditional conditional welfare system, if an unemployed person takes a part-time job or starts a freelance gig, they risk losing their entire housing or unemployment benefit.
Oh, right. Because the government basically says, oh, you made $200 this week. Great. We're taking away $200 of your benefits.
Precisely. The effective marginal tax rate on their new income can be close to 100%. They are financially penalized for working.
That is wild.
It is. So the Finland trial replaced that conditional benefit with unconditional cash. Suddenly, the fear of losing the safety net was completely gone. If a participant took a part-time job, that income was pure surplus.
Wow.
The UBI mechanism actively rewarded them for re-entering the workforce at their own pace, which is what spurred that positive employment signal.
That is so fascinating.
Right.
And the historical and global context really backs this behavioral shift up as well.
Yeah.
Give Directly ran a massive trial across roughly 20,000 people in Kenya.
Yeah, and that wasn't just about labor.
No, it fundamentally shifted household power dynamics. By giving independent resources to individuals, it notably empowered women's decision-making and autonomy.
And we actually saw similar ripple effects way back in the 1970s with the Mincome experiment in Manitoba, Canada.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah. That trial offered early, compelling evidence on how a financial floor impacts local labor patterns. While primary earners largely kept working, secondary earners, who were often mothers, used the financial buffer to extend maternity leaves.
Which is a huge social benefit.
Exactly. And teenagers stayed in high school longer instead of dropping out to support the family. So, yes, the labor supply contracted slightly, but it contracted for socially beneficial reasons.
If you're listening to this and thinking, well, this is all theory or this is small-scale stuff, we actually had a massive real-world beta test right here in the U.S. recently, and it wasn't even called UBI.
You're talking about the expanded child tax credit.
Yes, during the pandemic.
The text explicitly identifies the expanded child tax credit as a real-world, child-focused UBI model.
Because it was basically unconditional cash.
Exactly. For a brief window, the IRS didn't make parents wait until tax season. They delivered predictable monthly cash without restrictions on how it was spent. It acted as an unconditional baseline. Parents used it to stabilize their utility bills, purchase groceries, and secure reliable childcare, which in turn allowed them to maintain their working hours without interruption.
Okay, I have to push back here, though.
Mm.
I mean, we are looking at these incredible results. Durham helping 55 people, Stockton seeing better job searches, Finland removing the welfare trap.
Sure.
But a small, privately funded pilot or even a temporary pandemic measure funded by emergency debt,
Yeah.
I mean, that is profoundly different from a permanent change to a national economy.
Yes.
What happens when this actually scales? Because the math has to balance somewhere, right?
It's a critical distinction, and Römer's text acknowledges this limitation head-on. There are profound boundaries to what these pilots can teach us.
Okay.
They are excellent at measuring micro-level household behavior, individual well-being, and short-term job search patterns, but they fundamentally fail to test the massive macroeconomic impact.
Like the taxes.
Exactly. The aggressive tax restructuring required for a permanent nationwide rollout. A pilot program funded by a tech billionaire does not alter the federal tax code. A permanent UBI absolutely would.
Which brings us to the operational reality for every business owner and executive listening. The funding dilemma. If we actually scale this up, how is it funded? And how does that massive transfer of wealth loop back to affect corporate payrolls and tax liabilities?
The fiscal reality is incredibly steep. Generous UBI plans carry astronomical costs.
I mean, we're talking trillions, right?
Easily. International analyses cited in the text make it abundantly clear that to provide a meaningful payment, one that actually acts as a survival floor, it requires a massive budget, and funding that budget would likely demand a total overhaul of the income tax base.
Let's translate that into operational reality. What does that actually look like for, say, a CFO or an HR director running payroll for a 500-person company?
It means the architecture of your payroll software and your employee compensation packages changes dramatically. To fund UBI, governments would likely need to remove tax-free personal allowances.
Meaning what exactly?
It means every single dollar an employee earns, from the very first dollar, is subject to income tax. It would likely mean raising marginal tax rates across the board.
So the gross salary I offer a new hire suddenly yields a much lower net take-home pay, because the government is aggressively taxing it to fund the UBI they just received.
That is the trade-off. Furthermore, policymakers would have to adjust taper rates.
What are taper rates?
Taper rates dictate how quickly any remaining targeted support phases out as an employee's income rises. If those taper rates are steep, it directly impacts an employee's motivation to take on overtime or seek a promotion.
Because the tax burden cuts too deeply into their raise.
Precisely. To avoid putting the entire burden on income taxes, the proposals analyzed in the text often look at balanced multi-revenue approaches. Mixing funds from wealth levies, targeted consumption or sales taxes, or maybe carbon charges to spread the macroeconomic cost.
But I mean, the second you start talking about raising marginal tax rates, altering consumption taxes, and redistributing wealth unconditionally, you hit a massive, unavoidable political wall.
You absolutely do. And just to be entirely clear for you listening, we aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoint or taking a stance on these policies here. We are strictly impartial.
Right.
We are simply reporting the factual political barriers outlined in the research. In the U.S. political landscape, the text highlights the reciprocity debate as a major factual hurdle.
What does the reciprocity debate actually entail?
It is the deeply ingrained cultural and political expectation that public support must be linked to active contribution, either through work, active job searching, or skills training.
I do this, so the government does that.
Exactly. Removing those behavioral conditions to provide unconditional cash fuels significant political backlash. Furthermore, there is strong bipartisan resistance to broad universal taxes that appear to distribute monthly payments to wealthy individuals who objectively do not need the financial support.
It sounds to me like trying to rewire a house while the electricity is still running. I mean, if you strip away all the targeted wires, the specific disability programs, the housing vouchers, the food assistance we have now, and just flood the main line with a flat amount of unconditional cash, don't some people end up getting shocked?
That is a brilliant analogy for the transition risk. If policymakers implement a purely flat payment to every citizen and fund it by gutting existing targeted programs, you can actually cause severe harm to the most vulnerable groups.
Give me an example.
Sure, a flat $1,000 a month might reduce the overall national poverty rate, but if it replaces a more generous, targeted disability stipend or a high-value housing benefit, that specific individual with high medical costs is now objectively worse off. You've simplified the system, but you've damaged the user.
So how does the research suggest we fix that without just making the system an incomprehensible web of bureaucracy all over again?
The text points to the UBI Plus solution.
UBI Plus.
Yes. Leading experts favor models that provide that unconditional baseline of cash for everyone to remove the friction of basic survival, while purposefully retaining targeted supplementary supports for complex needs like housing, severe disability, and specialized childcare.
Oh, I see.
The UBI Plus approach aims to avoid the failures of a one-size-fits-all rollout. It ensures that single parents or individuals with acute medical costs aren't penalized by the very reform meant to help them.
All right, so we've mapped the theoretical mechanics, we've analyzed the behavioral data from the global pilots, and we've walked through the very real, highly complex tax and funding hurdles.
Yeah.
So let's bring this directly to the listener's desk. What does this mean for your organization's workforce planning? If this system update happens, how does it change your strategy next quarter?
It fundamentally reshapes the power dynamics of the labor market, and it completely rewrites retention strategies.
How so?
Predictable, unconditional cash changes how a workforce plans their careers. When people have a reliable financial floor, you see a massive reduction in crisis-driven job hopping.
Meaning they aren't forced to take the very first job they see just to make rent?
Right.
And they don't quit abruptly because a minor financial crisis like, I don't know, a blown transmission or a gap in childcare derailed their ability to commute.
Correct. When workers are no longer making desperation hires just to survive the month, companies see a natural reduction in turnover. And from a balance sheet perspective, turnover is incredibly expensive.
Oh, absolutely. It often costs up to 1.5 times a worker's salary to replace them.
Exactly. Preserving that institutional knowledge and recouping training investments provides massive ROI. Furthermore, Wint and McKay highlight how the dignity of unconditional support, the simple removal of punitive sanctions, and exhausting bureaucratic paperwork drastically improves mental health.
Which is huge for productivity.
Huge. For an employer, less financial stress translates directly into fewer sick days, lower healthcare premiums, and a much sharper focus on complex tasks.
And there is a massive diversity, equity, and inclusion angle to this as well, right?
A profound one. UBI inherently expands your available talent pool. It provides marginalized groups, primary caregivers, and women the independent financial resources they need to fully participate in the workforce.
Because they can actually afford the logistics of working.
Exactly. Whether that cash is used to secure reliable transport from an underserved neighborhood, cover consistent childcare, or pay for a certification course, it removes the structural barriers that keep diverse talent locked out of your hiring funnel.
I have to throw a strategic red flag here, though.
Go for it.
Put yourself in the shoes of a shift manager or an operations director. If my employees have a guaranteed cash floor hitting their bank account every month, regardless of whether they clock in, aren't they significantly more likely to just walk away if they don't like their schedule or they clash with their manager?
It's a valid fear.
How does a business actually retain top talent if the existential fear of missing rent is entirely removed from the equation?
It is the most common concern among executives. But the research frames this shift as a positive evolutionary pressure for the labor market. Yes, workers will absolutely have more bargaining power.
Right.
They will have the financial runway to hold out for safer schedules, more transparent career paths, and less toxic environments. The threat of starvation is no longer your retention tool.
Which forces companies to genuinely step up their game.
It forces organizations to compete on job quality, corporate culture, and flexibility, rather than relying on survival necessity. But if you adapt, it presents massive operational opportunities.
Like what?
Well, when basic living essentials are covered by a national cash floor, it becomes exponentially easier for companies to recruit for gig, fractional, or part-time roles. People seeking autonomy are far more attracted to flexible, project-based work if they aren't terrified of a variable monthly income.
That's a great point.
It also gives your current full-time employees the financial runway to pursue internal mobility. They can take a lower-paying apprenticeship within the company to learn a new skill without losing their livelihood.
So we aren't looking at the end of work. We are looking at the evolution of it. You are shifting from managing a workforce driven by panic and scarcity to leading a workforce driven by preference, alignment, and stability.
And that evolutionary leap requires a proactive, immediate response from leadership. You cannot wait for a federal policy to pass the legislature before you start adapting your HR infrastructure.
No, you can't.
Modern professionals need to start stress testing their staffing models and payroll scenarios today.
So what does that stress testing look like in practice for the people listening right now?
It means working with your finance team to model how hypothetical tax changes, like the removal of personal allowances or higher marginal rates, might affect your employees' net take-home pay and adjusting your compensation bands accordingly.
Okay, that's step one.
Step 2 is proactively pairing your current benefits and wellness programs with incredibly clear, transparent career pathways.
Right, giving them a reason to stay that isn't just survival.
Exactly. If you build that architecture now, your organization is positioned to capture the positive impacts of a financially stable workforce, like highly engaged, fiercely loyal, low turnover teams, while successfully managing the transition risks of a newly empowered labor pool.
Here's a thought to chew on long after you finish listening to this deep dive. We've talked extensively about retention, taxes, and flexibility. But let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at risk.
Okay.
If UBI becomes the ultimate unbreakable safety net, does it actually spark a new golden age of entrepreneurship? Because if the fear of starving, losing your house, or failing to feed your kids goes away, the personal risk of starting your own business suddenly drops to near zero.
That is a phenomenal strategic question.
Will your absolute best employees leave your company in the future, not for a competitor, but to build their own empire?
It really reframes the challenge. The competition for talent won't just be against other firms, it will be against the limitless potential of your employees' own ambitions.
Thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. We highly encourage you to hit subscribe so you never miss a deep dive into the complex trends shaping the future of your industry. And please take the time to read Felix Römer's full article on smartkeys.org to explore the granular data and specific policy models for yourself. You can find the direct link right there in the show notes. Until next time, keep analyzing, keep adapting, and keep looking ahead.